In my last video, we ranked the top 10 drop towers I've personally ridden, but what about the other flat rides out there? There is a never-ending list of different types of flat rides, and many of them I will find myself riding when I visit a new park. If I find one that is unique or supersized or crazy, I will try to make time for it. I have personally ridden more flat rides than I give myself credit for, which is why I'm excited to be sharing with you my top 15 flat rides I've ever ridden. Please take note that this will not be the most accurately ranked list I've ever done. Like, it'll be ordered to an extent, but it's mostly going to be my 15 favorite flat rides rather than my top 15 favorite flat rides. Also, like a lot of my other lists, this one will be updated way down the line as I ride more and more flat rides in the future. Some quick disclaimers: I will not be including drop towers in this video for two reasons. One, they would dominate this list, and two, I just made a separate video for my favorite drop towers, which I mentioned earlier. I also won't be including any observation rides such as Ferris wheels or sky towers, but I think most of you should have gone into this video expecting that. So those are the rules to my list, but I do have a long list of honorable mentions that I'd like to get right into. Firstly, the 16th spot would have gone to the Tilt-A-Whirl at Interstate Amusement Company in Seaside, Oregon. It's by far the best Tilt-A-Whirl I've ever ridden with its chaotic laterals and manual operating system. That said, I just could not find it in me to put it above any of the 15 flat rides on the list. As for the notable flat rides that I have not ridden that I still think deserve a mention, particularly at parks I have been to, let's start with the Windseekers and Sky Screamers. These are ginormous chair swing rides that can be found at various Six Flags and Cedar Fair parks in North America. For some reason, I just never get around to riding any of these, but it's honestly fine by me because I don't mess with heights like that. I also haven't ridden any slingshot ride, those scare me shitless, but I guess I would try one if it weren't for the crazy upcharge. Getting into the slightly more unique flat rides, I did not ride Riptide at Canada's Wonderland, but Riptide is very similar to another attraction at a fair that we'll be talking about later in the video. As for Canobies, I have not gotten around to riding their looper or satellite attractions. One of my home parks, Legoland, California, is a park that I have not been to in ages, but they have this one ride called Knight's Tornament that actually looks pretty crazy. That 100% would have been a contender had I ridden it. Another flat ride that comes to mind as an honorable mention is Squadron 33 at Playland's Castaway Cove, which is really just a smaller version of another ride I've ridden, but I'd still be willing to bet that it would have made the list. Last but not least, I attempted to ride X-Scream at the Stratosphere Tower in Las Vegas, but it closed right before I got on it due to high winds. So that, along with the other flat rides up there, would have probably made the list because of their locations atop the tower. But anyways, I'm sorry to bore you with this long list. Hopefully it gets shorter as I visit more parks and return to old ones. But with these caveats out of the way, I'd like to present to you my top 15 flat rides I've personally ridden. Number 15, Beach Blaster at Belmont Park. The traditional swinging pendulum model can be found at many parks all over the world. This version is pretty typical, a relatively small size and seats that face the inside of the claw. I've ridden a bunch of these in my time, but Beach Blaster in particular is my favorite. This one has a somewhat long ride cycle and it gives more airtime than some of the others I've ridden. It's also dug into this hole in the ground so it pops up and over it at its max swings. Plus the lighting package is amazing and it's not something that all these claw rides have. Number 14, Flying Aces at Lagoon. My second favorite set of flyers, Flying Aces is pretty easy to snap compared to the other rides of its kind. Like the claw rides we just talked about, I've ridden a ton of different flyers all across the United States, but some are definitely better than others. It still can be a bit tricky to snap them here, but again, it's much easier than some of the others, and for that, if you can get in the rhythm, it can be a really crazy ride. I will say that I was actually pleasantly surprised by Flying Aces since I had never really heard anything about it prior to riding. It was just after my first visit to Lagoon when I started hearing about how good this was compared to other flyers. I now confirm though that it's definitely worth the ride if you are at Lagoon. Number 13, Insanity 360 at the San Diego County Fair. This inverting frisbee ride is a supersized version of the pendulums we talked about earlier, and it's pretty dang intense. While I don't love hang time, I cannot deny that there was a noticeable amount on this ride, and overall it was pretty forceful in the valleys too. Something I noticed was how weird the seating arrangement on this ride is. You don't really face inwards or outwards, but rather you face to the side of each leg. While I haven't been to too many fairs or carnivals, you'll see that my home county fair has a lot of worthy flat rides on this list because it's actually one of the largest fairs in North America. We'll talk more on their rides in a second. Number 12, Windsurf at the San Diego County Fair. This top spin is seemingly one of the few I really enjoy. I usually skip these when I go to parks because they admittedly make me a bit dizzy. That said, when I saw that my fair had a pretty crazy one with cool effects, I knew I had to try it. While it did leave me a bit dizzy as expected, the flipping was pretty crazy and the sequence of flips was even crazier. At times, this ride will flip you 3 to 4 times in a row and you don't have a second to catch your breath. Its two legs also move in weird configurations at times, making for some really strange sensations. Another thing worth noting are the water effects. With the name Windsurf, of course this ride had to take advantage of some cool water effects. You don't actually get wet on this ride at all like some other top spins, but instead it squirts water right up to your face as if it was a near miss. These near miss elements really contribute to the ride, and it's a great touch. But to be honest, I am glad that it doesn't get you wet, because otherwise I probably would have never ridden this. Number 11, Octotron at Belmont Park. Despite the incredibly small size of my local boardwalk park, Belmont Park does have some surprisingly solid flat rides, with Octotron being the second ride from this park to make the list. Octotron is a very rare type of flat ride, known as the Unicoaster, which was manufactured by Chance Rides. From my knowledge, the only other ones in the US are Brain Surge at Mall of America's Nickelodeon Universe and Jimmy Neutron's Atom Smasher at the American Dream Mall's Nickelodeon Universe. What makes these rides so cool is that there's a lever that sits between the two seats per vehicle. One of the riders are able to control the flipping of this ride depending on which way to pull the lever. You can perform a front flip by pushing it forwards and a back flip by pulling it backwards. You can even stall yourself upside down if you want, but if that's something you want to do, you should go seek help. But overall, yeah, this is a nice rare flat ride, and I'm very happy to have it so close to home. Number 10, Maxx at the San Diego County Fair. While I haven't ridden this one in a while, I'll always remember Maxx as one of my favorite rides at the fairgrounds. You don't really invert on this ride, but you do go sideways and experience some vicious laterals. Combine that with the fact that you go forwards and backwards through the course, and it's a very memorable experience. It's definitely a bit repetitive, that I can't deny, but most flat rides are too, so it's nothing I can trash this ride on. I definitely want to check this ride out again soon, especially because I don't really remember it all too well, but I do remember enough to grant it a spot on this list. It is a fun time. Number 9, Sledgehammer at Canada's Wonderland. Manufactured by Huss Attractions, Sledgehammer is the only giant jumping machine that they ever built. With it being original to this park, there's bound to be some technical issues, but fortunately I was lucky enough to find it open during both visits I spent at the park, and I got to experience on the second day. This is quite the aggressive flat ride. When it gets started, it really jerks you around to prepare for what's to come. But what's cool about this ride are the jumps that it does, where it throws you in the air and spins you in circles. It's not really as dizzying as it looks, and it doesn't give you a lot of airtime as you'd expect, but it is a very weird sensation. The ride also thrusts you back down numerous times, and these do actually give you some airtime. Sledgehammer isn't exactly the best flat ride in the world. Like, it's obvious that some things it does are flawed, but it's still such a crazy looking ride, and it provides such a crazy experience. Number 8, Skyhawk at Canada's Wonderland. Another flat ride in the same park as Sledgehammer, Skyhawk was probably my favorite flat ride I rode while at the park. Like I said earlier, I didn't get to experience the Riptide attraction nor Cyclone, but we'll talk a bit more about the latter later on. What this ride basically is part Windseeker and part Unicoaster in my mind. But instead of a lever, you actually have a set of wings, one on either side, and you have to move them in the right directions in order to flip yourself upside down. As expected, these are pretty heavy, so you really have to be strong to get a bunch of flips in. From my understanding though, once you start flipping, you can't stop flipping. Unfortunately, I only got to ride this once since it suffered a breakdown, and during my one ride, I was only able to flip my seat one time, and it was at the end of the ride cycle. I am at least glad that I flipped once opposed to nothing at all. It was really rewarding to do that. I'm simply putting it this high because I love the idea of this ride, and I can recognize how crazy it would be to flip 20 or so times. It's also an extremely rare type of flat ride, like there's literally none of these in the US. This makes it the only Gerstlauer sky roller of its size in North America. So absolutely, I'm glad I was able to get on it, and hopefully when I get back to the park I'll be able to get more flips. Number 7, S&S Screamin' Swings. Come on guys, who doesn't love a good Screamin' Swing? These are very enjoyable flat rides, and I love that you're always facing the two directions that you'd want to face on a pendulum ride. All it is forwards and backwards motions, none sideways, nothing like that. I've ridden I think 5 of these, one at Kennywood, one at Lake Compounds, the 2 at the fun spots, and 1 at Cedar Point. Skyhawk, being the latter, is my favorite for its sheer size. It's quite a bit larger than the others. I actually find that no matter the size of the Screamin' Swing, you will be getting some good airtime and wind in your face. These are also pretty common compared to other flat rides, so if you find one at a park you go to, then try to get on it. Number 6, Mondial Revolutions. Otherwise referred to as a Mondial Frisbee or pendulum, these are just exactly that. They are pretty dang big compared to most other Frisbee rides, and can be found at a lot of Cedar Fair parks. My favorite is Maxx Air at Cedar Point since it's the largest, but there's also one at King's Dominion, Kings Island, and Canada's Wonderland, which I hinted at earlier. They are all virtually the same and are all a ton of fun. I was a bit worried about the bulky restraints going in because the Zamperla versions only have lap bars, but thankfully these didn't affect the ride experience at all. I was able to get some good speed and airtime, which I really enjoyed. Number 5, Magnum at the San Diego County Fair. Known as the Mondial Shake, Magnum has and always will be one of my favorite rides at my local fairgrounds. When you start flipping on these things, you will rock violently back and forth, and it is very disorienting and intense. The rotations are also super aggressive and have me praying that all the bolts are screwed in tight. Like the other crazy flat rides on here, Magnum can get you quite a bit dizzy, but at the end of the day, I think that's the ride's goal. This is a really intense and fun flat ride, and it's definitely not recommended for the faint-hearted. Number 4 is Zamperla Giant Discoveries. An even larger version of the already massive Mondial Frisbees, the Zamperla versions are absolutely incredible. They are by far my favorite pendulum rides out there, just for the sheer scale. Falling from that max height face first is both exhilarating and horrifying. These can be found all over at the Six Flags parks, but the one I ride the most is Crazanity at Six Flags Magic Mountain. That one stands 170 feet in the air and swings you at 75 miles per hour. I believe it's also the tallest ride of its kind at the moment, as it's tied with a couple other giant discoveries. And actually, I believe these taller ones are referred to as Giga Discoveries, but I just refer to all of them as giant discoveries, so if you were confused, I'm sorry. But yeah, most Six Flags parks have these, so if you live near a Six Flags, be sure to give it a ride. Number 3, Samurai at Lagoon. The Top Scan ride is pretty common at theme parks in the US. I even have one close to me at Knott's Berry Farm known as Soul Spin, but Samurai craps all over the other ones. This ride runs an absolutely insane program. First you go forwards, where the seats rock back and forth violently and flips you at no mercy of the riders. Then you repeat this backwards. If the ride ended after the forwards half, it would still make the top 15, but I could not believe how long it sustained its aggressive nature. The ride had absolutely no chill until it stopped at the end. And I honestly don't even care for top scans normally, but Samurai opened my eyes up to how crazy these rides can be if ran at an intense nature. Number 2, Flyers at Knoebels. I can't even believe this ride exists. You're seeing video of it now, swinging far higher than they should be swinging. If you're familiar with Flyers and haven't seen the Knoebels ones, you're probably freaking out right now. On the other hand, if you haven't ridden very many flat rides or are just a tough critic, you're probably wondering why this is at the number 2 spot. These Flyers could not be easier to snap. Its program is insane to the point where it'll go so high in the air, and as a result, it might snap itself by itself. As I mentioned earlier, Flying Aces at Lagoon is my second favorite set of Flyers, but not even that can hold a candle to the Knoebels Flyers. Honestly, you have to come out and ride it to understand how ridiculous this ride is. Take my word for it. If you do know how to snap well, you're gonna be in heaven. Number 1, Sky Coasters. Despite these normally being upcharge attractions, I decided to fork out some money to ride the one at Magic Mountain since my friend had a ride twice at the price of one deal with his Diamond Elite Season Pass. To be honest, I couldn't have been more glad to experience it because had I not ridden it, I would have never found out how amazing Sky Coasters are. What basically happens is you're harnessed in this suit, which is winched to the top of the Sky Coaster tower. Then it pulls you up to the top, and at the top you pull a ripcord and fall at a near vertical, if not vertical, angle before swinging back and forth. It's probably the closest thing I'll ever do to skydiving, and it's an unforgettable experience. I know it's very expensive, but I urge you all to try a Sky Coaster out. They are situated at theme parks all over the world, even at small family entertainment centers sometimes. I am personally eyeing the world's tallest Sky Coaster at Fun Spot Kissimmee this summer, even though I'll be terrified, but I know I just have to do it. Never forget guys, live life to the fullest. If you find yourself near a Sky Coaster, freaking ride it. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed hearing about my top 15 favorite flat rides I've personally experienced. If done right, flat rides are really a whole lot of fun, and for that I'd love to hear about what your favorite flat rides are down in the comments. Also, if you could drop a like on this video as well as subscribe to the channel, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for watching everyone, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye guys.